Hi everyone, this is Tim Ash, CEO of SiteTuners and chairperson of the Conversion Conference. Welcome to our monthly webinar. We try to bring you thought leaders in conversion rate optimization so that you will learn as much as you can, not only from us, but the best people in the field. And my guest today and the presenter, Neil Patel, is definitely one of those experts. If you haven't already been following Neil, I'll tell you a little bit about him. He's the co-founder of Kissmetrics, Crazy Egg, and Hello Bar. He's worked with companies like Amazon, NBC, GM, HP, Viacom. I'm sure you've heard of a few of these. The Wall Street Journal calls him a top influencer on the web, and Entrepreneur magazine says he created one of the 100 most brilliant companies in the world. He's also recognized as a top 100 entrepreneur under age 30 by President Obama. And I could go on and on. He's been awarded the congressional recognition by the House of Representatives, although that's a dubious distinction. No, just joking. But I'm going to, without any further ado, introduce my buddy Neil Patel. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks for having me. So, yeah. Today I'm going to be covering 11 obvious A/B tests that you should try. Can you guys see my screen?
Absolutely.
All right, let's get started. So it won't take me too long, easy to follow along. They'll all be numbered 1 through 11. I've been doing, here's my Twitter handle, hashtag as well. And I've been doing business for 11 years now. And throughout each of these businesses, right, I first started out focusing on traffic acquisition. I quickly ended up learning that traffic is one half of the battle. If you can't make your visitors convert into customers, it's almost useless, right? If you have 1 million visitors to your site every single month, but you can't convert one of them, what's the point of having those 1 million visitors? Chances are you're actually losing money at that point because you have hosting costs, right, maintenance costs, etc. So I eventually learned that to convert the visitors into customers, I need to start learning more about A/B testing. And over the years, I've run hundreds of A/B tests, and we usually run at least 4 new A/B tests a month, so it adds up pretty fast. And pretty much these tests are going to be all from my experience as well as what some of my other friends experience as well with A/B testing. So let's get started. Number 1, test the word free in your ads. It actually sounds really simple, but having the word free can actually drastically decrease your CPA. So Treehouse, which teaches you about education, right? So if you want to learn web design, web development, you would actually sign up for Treehouse, watch the educational videos. It's kind of like a lynda.com, but for design and development. And you can learn quite a bit. So they're buying a lot of ads, from buy-sell ads, through Google ads, through all these different places. And they were seeing that their CPA was $60, which isn't that great, right? Especially when your plans start around $19 or $29 a month or somewhere in that price range. So they were just like, hey, how do we decrease our CPA? They did a quick test. They added in the banner, start for free. And what they noticed was their CPA instantly went from $60 down to $43. That's a pretty nice, increase in conversions from just adding the word free to your banner. Having the word free, in case you guys didn't hear, you can actually decrease your CPA. And of course you need to test it. What works for one business may not work for you, but when Treehouse tested this, their CPA went from $60 to $43. That's a really good decrease in cost, right? And that helped them spend more money on advertising and ramp it up faster, because now they can make back their money. If a customer's staying for 4 or 5, 6 months, right, they're losing money right away, but they can make back the money within 2 months. Number 2, create an explainer video. So with Crazy Egg, we decided to test the explainer video on our homepage. We went from having a very short homepage to having a detailed, almost like a sales letter type homepage, and we saw a conversion increase. And the reason we saw a conversion increase is because we explained all the information that people needed. But what we quickly learned was not everyone actually kept scrolling down and reading the content. So we're like, all right, although a lot of people like longer form content, not everyone does. So we're just like, how can we actually turn this content into a video format? So we went out there, surveyed our visitor base, found out the objections they had before they signed up for the product or service, And we actually created an explainer video that not only broke down what you're going to get, but it answered any objections, or at least the major ones, that people had. And by doing this, we saw a 64% increase in conversion rate. Test number 3, have your sign up button scroll, right? So this is another test by Treehouse. And what they found out is by making it really simple for people to sign up, having the sign up button scroll with the user as they scroll down, they were able to increase conversion by 138%. That's not bad at all, right? Now, granted, with your site, you want to test this as well. And one quick thing that I learned, because I've tested this on a few different sites, it typically works better on long form pages. When I've tested it on short home pages or short web pages or landing pages or whatever it may be, I actually saw a decrease in conversion. Again, you should test it and see what works well for you, but it's something worth testing nonetheless. Test number 4, remove form fields. So I actually did this one on my personal site, neilpatel.com, and I used to have a lot more form fields. One of the form fields was budget. Another one was phone numbers. And I kept on removing them. And I went down to 4 form fields, and I had first name, email address, website URL, and phone number. Then I removed phone number, and I saw increasing conversions by 26% through phone number. The beautiful part about this was, and I'm still running tests on that site, when I say a 26% increase, I was able to get a 26% increase in the end without actually removing the form field. So what I did was I started asking all those other questions on step 2. So I would have first name, email address, website URL, and then phone number and budget on the second page. So instead of a thank you page, I added just this more form fields on the second step. And it worked out quite well. But nonetheless, even when I removed them and didn't add the second steps, I saw even a bigger increase, but I needed that information. So you can test it out, but usually the more form fields you remove, the better off you are. And I see a lot of companies asking for basic form field information, such as state or zip code. But if you know where people are located based off their IP address, or if you put in their URL and you can see where their company is based, you don't actually need to ask a lot of that basic information because you can get it on your own. Test number 5, 2-step checkout process. And I touched on this a bit before, right, in the previous one. But what we started doing with checkout processes is start taking them from a 1-step to a 2-step. And funny enough, I've tested this a lot. I've actually never seen a decrease in conversion rate from it. Now, granted, I'm not going to say it's always going to win, but every time I've tested, putting an email and password first, or name and email, and then the rest of the questions on step 2, I've seen an increase. And typically, from surveying and digging a bit deeper into user psychology, what I quickly learned was when people give you a bit of information, they may not want to give you the rest, but they're like, well, I already gave them my email and password. Might as well fill out the rest of the information. And that's typically the thought process that goes through people's head, which causes them to give you more information, right? Not everyone will complete the 2-step checkout, but you should see roughly a 10% lift. And for the people that don't, through an email drip sequence, you can usually capture a portion of those people who didn't fill out the rest of the checkout and get them back to your site and get them to purchase. Test number 6, show off your live product. So when we owned KISS Insights, it's now named Qualaroo, we did a quick test. And what the test was is actually showing the product on our home page and in a really simple area, right? So right by sign up, because it's a quick survey thing that just pops up like that black box that you're seeing on the screen, it would pop up within the window next to sign up, and it would say, is there anything preventing you from downloading this software or from signing up, right? And it was just, we clearly said it was an example. And what it caused was an increase in conversion by 38%. And the reason we found this was really effective was when we were doing surveying, people ended up stating, hey, we're not sure what your product does or how it's different than SurveyMonkey. And we started trying to solve all this through explanations and a lot of text. But what we quickly found was by showing it on the home page versus a demo page or, request a product demo page or whatever you want to end up calling it, but just showing it on the home page without any gates, like so say, hey, put in your name and email before you see the demo. But just by clearly showing it, making it really simple, people are like, oh, I get what this does. I don't actually need to read a lot of text to understand this product, so I'm going to sign up for it. And we saw a 38% increase in conversion rate just from that one test. Test number 7, free trial versus money-back guarantee. I was actually a big believer that there was no difference until I started testing this, because at the end of the day, what's the real difference, right? So with the money-back guarantee, if you're not happy, you can get your money back. With free trial, you're getting billed anyways within 30 days. So even if you take credit card up front for both of them, what I end up quickly realizing is people like the concept of a free trial, and we saw 116% increase in conversion from a free trial on the front end. And the reason I say front end is you do get cancellations in the free trial, right? When you're doing volume, it's very rare that if you're getting 1,000 free trial signups, that 1,000 actually continue the free trial, right? A portion will drop off, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 50%, right? It varies a lot. Portion will end up dropping off. So on the front end, we saw a 116% increase. Now granted, half the people did not drop off, so the test overall won, right? And on top of that, even with the money-back guarantee, right, even if it was 116% less in signups, if 100 people signed up with the money-back guarantee, a portion of those people would request their money back. So we found that the free trial actually increased revenue in the long run when we look at the lifetime value of the customer. Reason being is those people who canceled the free trial weren't that into it, but the people who continued it were really passionate users, and they continued paying for a very long time because they got to test it out for free. Test number 8, trial length. So we always thought that the longer the trial length, the better off you are. And with Kissmetrics, we actually tested a 14-day trial length versus a 30-day. And we saw actually a 102% increase in conversion rate when we're looking at implementation of the code, right? So with any analytics solution, whether it's Google Analytics, Crazy Egg, Kissmetrics, if you don't implement some sort of JavaScript on your site, you usually can't track any information, right? Unless you're doing web-based, like weblog type of analytics. So what we found out is when we gave a 30-day free trial, people felt they had such a long time to use a product that they would very rarely implement. But when we gave them a 14-day trial, pretty much by reducing the time window, we didn't see any difference in sign-up rate. So before with the 30-day trial, 100 people would sign up, and with the 14-day trial, still 100 people would sign up. But the difference was we saw a 102% increase in the actual amount of people who implemented the code. So on a 14-day trial, more than double the amount of people actually implemented the JavaScript on their site and started tracking data. And that's useful for us. And the reason being is it's very hard for us to convince someone to buy our product and pay for it when they haven't implemented it yet, right? So test trial length. Longer isn't necessarily better, and too short also isn't that good because it may not give enough give people enough time to actually test out your product. Test number 9, time-based bonuses. So I did something on a sales page I once had. I was selling an ebook, and I put the first 100 people to join get this extra SEO product. I also did something else that you're not seeing in the image where I said the first 50 people to join also get this. And by doing it, I didn't get a huge increase in signups, but I got 11%. Not bad, right? And funny enough, even when I actually put, hey, this is no longer valid, people would actually email me and say, hey, I will sign up if you give me that bonus. I know I'm not one of the first 100 people, but that tactic actually worked out quite well. Test number 7, or 10 actually, adding dollar values to free offers. So in my sidebar on my personal blog, QuickSprout, I actually give away a course, Double Your Traffic in 30 Days. And I spent a lot on it. I think I spent over $20,000 developing it. But I threw an arbitrary number, right? Because $20,000, yeah, although I spent that much if I sold it, I probably would have sold it only at anywhere from a few $100, like $300. So I was like, all right, let me put a $300 value in there. And by putting a price tag on the free offer, people are like, oh, wow, I'm actually getting some pretty cool stuff for free. Let me actually put in my name and email. And we saw a 22% increase in conversions just by this one simple trick. And people were actually really happy. They're like, wow, you're giving a lot away for free. Test number 11, button colors, right? So Performable, which was acquired by HubSpot, ended up doing a test where they're like, hey, let's test red over green. And this doesn't mean it's going to work for you because it depends on a lot of variables, such as the contrast, right, of the buttons and how it stands out from your background colors or blends in, or the other colors you're using on the page. But they were using a lot of green before. They weren't using much red. They decided to make their call to action red. They saw it increasing click-throughs by 21%. And the reason I say click-throughs is they're tracking how many people clicked on the button. The data that I found, it didn't clearly state if they actually got 21% increase for more signups, but typically more clicks on a button usually means more signups, right? So those are 11 A/B tests that you should end up trying. You can always, read my blog at ClickSprout or blog.kissmetrics, and you can always check out our analytics tool, kissmetrics.com.
Well, fantastic, Neil. Thank you for that. Neil went through those super quickly. What I'm hoping we can do, and we have lots of time, is turn this into more of an extended Q&A with you, and so that people can kind of pick your brain about testing ideas. So if you haven't done this already, folks, go ahead and use your chat window, or rather the question window in the GoToWebinar, and submit questions, and I'll just kind of tee them up for you, Neil. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with some quick questions here. Just keep them coming. But before, one of the things that Pamela is asking is, how long do you run your tests? Let's talk about test hygiene, if you will.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. A lot of people typically end tests when they're statistically significant. So Google Website Optimizer, Optimizely, or Google Content Experiments now, right? Or Google Experiments. But all these tools tell you when a test is over. They'll be like, hey, it reached statistical significance. We have enough data to assume that there's a 98 or 99% statistical significance for variation A to win. So people end the test then. What I typically do is I will never end a test unless the winning variation has at least 100 conversions, because I found that in the long run it can actually change quite a bit. Sometimes you'll get a quick 30, 40 conversions on one variation, 10 on another, and it'll say, hey, the one with 40 won. I also will not end a test if it doesn't run for at least 7 days. What we found out with our businesses may not be the same with your businesses, but Mondays are different than Tuesdays, and they're different than Wednesdays, etc., right, all the way up to Saturday and Sunday. So we actually make sure our tests run for at least a week. So typically, we wait a week minimum. We have at least 100 conversions on each variation, and we make sure it also hits statistical significance. And that's
okay, well that's great to hear you say that, because I get this all the time, and I wrote a whole section in my landing page optimization book about the math of testing, of course. But you're absolutely right. I think one of the basics of test hygiene is to average out across day of week and time of day effects. So you have to run them in increments of 1 week, not at least a week, but you can't run it for 9 days where you'll get double coverage on the weekend. So we always do it in increments of a week. And then what you said, don't trust just the statistical significance part. Some of those tools have pretty, how would you say, squirrely math, I would say.
Definitely.
So definitely more data is always good, and if you can afford to run and you have variations that are beating your original, you should just run it longer to be more certain. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that, and you have nothing to lose, right? So if your new variation's winning, it's not like you're losing money. Sure, you could be making more if the new one just stayed on all the time, but you never really know the real conversion rate. And what we found out is when we didn't run tests long enough and we just ended it when it said statistical significant and it didn't have enough data, when we implemented the new version and let it run fully, we didn't actually see the revenue increases that we thought we would see based on the data from the A/B test.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about video. We've had a couple of folks, Jake and Don, asking about video. So Don's asking, so how long were the homepage videos and the product demo videos, and what's kind of the optimum video length to increase conversion and have people actually watch it?
So you're going to have to end up testing that out. I think it's going to range for each type of business. If you're asking for a larger commitment, such as a lot of money, you probably need a longer video. If you're asking for something that's $1, right, you probably don't need that longer video or maybe even a video at all. And what we found out, it's not about video length that really affects conversion. It's answering objections that we found out that boost conversions more than anything else with videos. Because your customers or visitors, or potential visitors, will have a few objections, right? And you may have hundreds of objections, but there may be like 5 or 10 that are really popular. And by answering those objections within the video, what you'll end up finding out is you'll quickly see a conversion increase. Because if someone said, like with Crazy Egg, we found out that a lot of the people said, hey, we don't want to sign up for Crazy because we're afraid that it's going to slow down our website load time, which affects our search engine rankings. So we talked about in the video on how our fast servers won't slow down your site, and asynchronous JavaScript, etc., right? People also said, hey, we're not sure about trying it out, what's the value, etc. So we talk about, hey, there's a free trial, you have very little to lose, right? We also had other objections on people saying like, hey, we're not sure how good the product is, right? Who else uses it? Like, is it really that valuable? And we said, hey, our product must be good if X, Y, and Z companies are using it, right? So we talked about, all the other big brands that are using it.
Okay, so basically trust and overcoming objection. I think what we're talking about is building credibility. So it's more the content of the video that matters, you're saying, and not so much the length?
Exactly. So you got to really understand the objections more than anything else.
But I would say, if it's just an introductory video, I would say that you ideally would want to keep it anywhere from 30 seconds to 90 seconds. We've seen a lot of video analytics that said there's a big drop-off within a minute, actually.
That's right, and the 30-second spot, like you said, is ideal. We found you get the least amount of drop-off in a 30-second video.
Okay, Heather asked about low traffic pages. I'm going to take this one, Neil, because what if you only have 4 to 5 conversions a week? Well, let's not even pretend that you can do landing page testing. Our basic rule of thumb is you need about 10 conversions a day for even basic A/B split testing. And even at those data rates, you need some big wins in order for that to show up statistically. So folks, testing does not work. If you're pretending to run 3 to 6 month tests because you have no data rate, it's not real testing. Just cut it out. Do some best practices, move on, get more traffic to your site, but don't kid yourself that it's statistical testing. You want to add to that, Neil?
You got it right. The big thing that I found is when people have like under 400 or 500 conversions a month, especially like when you're under a few hundred conversions, I just tell people to focus on traffic, right? Because if you can get your traffic to 1,000 conversions a month, it's so much easier to test.
Well, and also just a little tip of how to bulk up your conversions, it's what you call a conversion. For example, let's say you have people land on a page and you're measuring all the way to the end of some registration process 3 pages later. Well, you can just optimize the first page and get more people to the second page. That in itself is a test, how to focus people's attention and get them to start the process. And there's a lot more of those first page conversions happening than there will be bottom of the funnel completions. So you can multiply your data rate by measuring a click-through or the first stage in the process and get your data rate up that way. So Neil, Justin Mayrick is asking about when you run tests, what are good traffic sources? What qualities should your traffic sources have to be effective for testing?
Good quality traffic sources are ones that drive sales, right?
Well, what I mean is what's acceptable for testing. There's very spiky stuff like email drops to your own list and affiliate traffic, PPC, SEO.
When I test, I like actually testing each channel individually that you can control. You can't control direct traffic, referral traffic, SEO traffic, right? Those go to whatever pages Google wants to send them to or whatever people type into the URL bar or link to from their site. So those you just test as you're running a normal test. But if you're doing pay-per-click, I would actually set up landing pages for pay-per-click and then actually do an A/B test just for that traffic or those specific keyword sets, etc., right? But you want to bucket it off and segment. And the reason being is generic tests tend not to do as well as high qualified tests, right, that are very targeted towards that traffic.
All right. Well, I know that some of the folks are going to be dropping off here as we go on with the Q&A. I just wanted to put out a couple of quick shout-outs. If anyone's interested in having a their website reviewed, either a 45 or 90-minute review, just go to expressreviewoffer.com, and thanks to Neil's Tips as the promo code, this is just good for today or tomorrow, you'll get $150 off. Neil's Tips at expressreviewoffer.com. And for those of you that don't know, Neil is also going to be returning as a speaker at the Conversion Conference in San Francisco next month. And again, this is just a 2-day code. Neil's Tips gets you $400 off the conference. Pass this around. Neil's Tips, $400 off a Conversion Conference, San Francisco. All right. Neil, back to the questions we have. One of the things that you were saying is, what kind of bad ideas are there to run tests on? Somebody's asking, Josh, actually you should know better, but is it okay to run overlapping tests that are hitting the same part of your site simultaneously?
Yeah, I usually never end up doing that, right? Like I'll run 2 tests at the same time, but they're touching 2 totally separate sites. For example, I'll run a homepage test on Crazy Egg, and then I'll run a test on an upgrade page. And the upgrade page is only seen by existing users, right? But they don't affect each other because the homepage test is only seen by new potential customers, and the upgrade page is only seen by existing customers. So I don't recommend you running 2 tests at the same time on similar pages that affect the same audience, because then it really makes the data hard to interpret for most people, right? And it just skews the results.
Okay, one thing, and not everybody, especially bigger companies, can do this, but one thing that struck me in your 11 tests was basically testing the business model to see what works. A lot of times we're optimizing what's on the page, or we're assuming that the stuff behind the scenes can't change, but this free trial versus paid trial, credit card required versus not required, those require different back-end plumbing. Effectively, they're different business models, but if you can test those, what are the benefits of testing different business models?
Yeah, when you test different business models, you can drastically increase revenue. And we've seen that the harder tests and the crazier tests, like the more radical ones, like changing up the business model or the pricing or annual versus monthly, etc., that's what really starts affecting people's cash flow and revenue, right? So it's like those big wins. Like we found that when you test little things, if button color really has that big of an impact on your conversion rate, there's probably a lot of other elements on the page that can be changed and tweaked and still have a big boost. But when you figure out the big stuff like business model, revenue models, etc., that's usually what provides a big revenue lift.
Okay, let's talk a little bit because about mobile. Increasingly that's an important part of the traffic mix. Have you done any mobile-specific testing, or do you see differences in behavior for people doing on a mobile device?
Yeah, I've actually done quite a bit of mobile. I've learned a few things. Number one, in the B2B world, mobile is not that popular. People still don't convert highly, and we've looked at a lot of businesses from the mobile web, right? Because usually when businesses are spending thousands of dollars, you're not going to spend that on your mobile phone.
Right.
What we found out for mobile testing, typically a lot of purchases especially are increasing rapidly with e-commerce, and having really fluid mobile designs, responsive designs, etc., we found that that's been boosting conversions for a lot of people. Making checkout processes really simple as well has helped. Tapping into other parties like Amazon payments or whatever it may be, we found a lot of that kind of stuff also helps with mobile. And another test is you can also charge money to carriers. So you could just bill it to their Verizon account or AT&T account or whatever it may be. We found that that also helps as well with conversions.
Okay, terrific. Now, one of the questions is, really how you pick a goal for each test. Yehud is asking that. I'm going to generalize that a little bit. What if you have competing priorities? What if you want a free trial, or at the same time you're doing an email grab, or you want some people to actually pay and buy on the spot? What if you have mixed goals? How do you run tests involving multiple competing priorities?
So with us, we actually always track revenue. So some may be a free trial, some may be money back guarantee, some may be an email drop at a discount and try to get a lot of people to buy. We just track revenue numbers, and we optimize for what drives the most revenue and profit.
So one of the questions that Ryan had was, do these principles apply to email testing as well, or just landing page testing? I'm going to actually recast that a little bit. Email is a kind of a polluted traffic source. If you hit your own mailing list, they're biased by all the previous communications you have with them. So what is some of the hygiene around testing with an email list, and should you do that at all? Maybe is the question to ask.
Yeah, you definitely should, right? And you got it right. Emails are usually warm leads, assuming you're not just spamming and collecting a ton of emails without people's permission. But emails are typically warm leads, which means they're going to convert better than most traffic sources. So what we ended up finding out when you're doing email testing is you need to be careful. And the reason you have to be careful is a lot of times people don't want these communications. So when we do email testing, we'll test different subject lines, headings, etc. But what we found to be one of the most ideal tests for us is we actually don't keep sending you offers and emails if you didn't open up the previous email in that sequence. And the reason being is it affects your deliverability rate. So if I keep emailing you and you don't open up your email, even though you don't mark people as spam, what will end up happening is Gmail and all these email systems automatically start moving those new emails into spam. And although that provides you less revenue in the short run, we've actually found by doing that through testing that it provides us more revenue in the long run because it increases deliverability rates.
Okay, so there are a lot of nuances about email. Some other ones, of course, if you insist on testing with it, which by the way I'm still not convinced is a great idea, you need to trickle out your send and not do it in one big drop, because the exact time of week or time of day you do the mailing really affects the open rate. So if you're going to do it over the course of a week, dribble them out on some schedule. Don't do it in one big drop.
Yeah, and usually your email provider also has data. Like if you just hit them up, they'll actually tell you on when most people open up emails and stuff, right? Because they have sample sizes that are really large. So they can a lot of times aggregate data across the board and said, well, if most of your emails are based on people in the U.S., here are the time ranges that you should test out.
Okay, so when you talk about different traffic sources, is there anything that you can say about how radically? Have you ever had tests where you run the same versions in the test, but different versions are preferred by different traffic sources?
I have, and I've actually seen that, and it's actually funny. So I've actually had tests for the same keyword in which organic visitors prefer something different than pay-per-click visitors. And in that case, what we do is we just create different landing pages and let the organic people land wherever Google sent them, because it's harder to change that page, and let the write without affecting rankings. And then we let the pay-per-click traffic go to a different page.
Okay, terrific. So, and yeah, it happens all the time, folks. Different audiences are different. Even ones coming from paid search, whether it's Bing or Google, is a big difference, and they're different populations of people. Okay, any recommendations on software for A/B testing?
We use Optimizely a lot. Yeah, we love Optimizely on our end.
We've had a lot of our clients have had great experience with them, and have a lot of respect for them. Dan Soroker, their CEO, has spoken at the conversion conference before, so they're a wealth of knowledge, and their tools work well.
Cool. Do you guys have your own A/B testing software?
No, we're strictly an agency, and whatever our clients use, we're good with. I was just cautioning, I think a lot of those testing softwares, when I was saying the math is a little hokey, I'll just be real clear about that. If you have an A/B test, the math works fine. In other words, statistical confidence. I'm 95% sure I found something better, that kind of thing. But if you're actually running a multi-way split test, they keep using the same math, or a multivariate test, and basically they're overestimating the confidence. They're still assuming it's a two-way test, and so basically, are you beating your control is what they're measuring. They're not saying, is this the best of the other 40 versions I may be trying? That's much harder to answer and requires a lot more data.
Yeah, and then if you're ever going to use Optimizely, make sure, because their default conversion tracking when they're doing A/B testing is engagement, make sure you actually have a real conversion goal and you're not just tracking engagement, because engagement's not going to do much for you.
Okay, Angie is asking how far out should you develop a test plan, because it's obsolete because of some of the other lessons learned. For our part, we develop the test plan after we see the results of the previous test. We never kind of have several that are contingent on future results?
Yeah, so we're very similar. So what we end up doing is we plan out 2 or 3 tests at a time, but the tests aren't reliant on each other. For example, we may plan out a front-end test on Crazy on our homepage and a back-end test for existing members. So we'll run a few different tests. We'll plan them out. But again, we usually always wait for the results, right? When we're planning out tests, the other tests we're planning out aren't affected by the previous test, right? So we wouldn't plan out a test on our Crazy Egg homepage and then also plan out another test for our Crazy Egg homepage, right? We wait for the test to actually show data and results.
That's right. So you can parallelize things. You just have to be working on different parts of your site or different landing pages in parallel. But as we talked before, you don't really want certainly simultaneous overlapping tests on the same pages or even contingent tests where you don't know the results of one, but you're already launching another one that might be affected by the prior results, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so one question here is, if assuming you have high traffic volumes, is Taguchi or multivariate testing good, and when should you use it?
Yeah, so I don't know what Taguchi testing is. We do, is it Banyan testing? Is that what it's called, Banyan or something like that? In which it's continual testing of the variations, and then the system automatically determines if traffic to one variation should be lower or higher.
Are you talking about Bayesian, maybe?
Bandit testing, maybe?
No, I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I could do, again, if you're interested in that, we do have a whole section in the book about it. Taguchi is a form of fractional factorial testing. Basically means you sample only certain kind of combinations of features in your multivariate test, and you're predicting how other ones will behave. So it allows you to have fewer test versions, but it is assuming that the things on your page don't interact with each other. And I'm going to warn you guys against that, because assuming that your headline doesn't interact with your call to action button, and that doesn't interact with your hero shot, and that doesn't interact with your offer, that's a lot of assumptions. In fact, we're designing pages to synergistically work together. So the problem with some of those multivariate testing isn't the testing itself, it's the assumptions that you're putting into the test, saying that none of these things influence each other. Emil, have you ever had a headline influence a call to action, for example?
Yeah, right. So a headline can definitely influence a call to action, and especially if they're tied together, right, you can see more clicks. But
yeah, you'll see more synergy. So it's the same thing, for example, if you have a pay-per-click ad with certain messaging, continuing that messaging on the landing page, and that continuity can be very, very powerful. So it's the same thing on your page. Reinforcing a call to action with a headline can make it doubly powerful. And unfortunately, most multivariate testing math assumes that they're independent decisions. All right. Other thoughts about kind of different analytics software? So let's talk about why you created Kissmetrics versus somebody using, say, Google Analytics to do their analytics.
Sure. So I think Google Analytics is great, and I use it myself. But what we found out as a business, because my background's in software, right, and I've created a few software companies. What I ended up finding out was Google Analytics does a great job of telling me, how many people are coming to my site, tracking the front end, but what about the back end? They don't really track in an efficient manner on who's upgrading, what's the lifetime value of my customer, why are people churning, right? There's all these questions that I didn't know. Even for e-commerce, the average selling price, right, or average order value, it was really hard for Google to specifically track that and be like, oh, cool, I'm spending X dollars on pay-per-click. Here's the lifetime value of the customer. Yeah, I may be losing money like Amazon on my first purchase, but people come back 3, 4, 5 times, and then I make up X dollars within a year, right? So all these questions were things that we and some of our friends had, so we ended up creating Kissmetrics to help solve that.
Okay, great. And then one of the ideas that you had in your 11 tests was kind of a sneaky way to get shorter forms, higher conversions, and then sneak the form field back in. So one of the things you talked about essentially was asking for the same information but staging it. So asking for things on the second screen instead of the first screen. That way you get both the higher click-through on the first screen and then higher completion rates anyway. Have you done a lot of testing with extremes of that? In other words, is it one-page forms work best, or bite-sized chunks with many, many steps work best, or something in between? What's your experience?
It ranges quite a bit, but we've typically seen bite-sized tests work the best. Bite-sized pages in which multiple steps.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. A lot of times what we see is forms fall into this kind of ugly in-between, which is each individual screenful is still kind of complicated and has multiple tasks or concepts on it, and there are multiple steps. So you either make them really, really bite-sized chunks, or you say, yeah, it's long and ugly, but this is the only page you have to deal with and you're done.
Exactly.
Rarely do things in the middle work better. Let's talk a little bit about segmentation. Do you do anything with to segment visitors, for example, first time versus repeat visitors or anything like that, or how do you segment your test besides traffic source?
Yeah, we found that. So we've done traffic source, and we talked a bit about that earlier, right, from pay-per-click to SEO, etc. But we actually do quite a bit of stuff with segmentation of new visitors versus repeat. We've actually found that by adjusting the sales pages or the offer pages, by having less information, because if someone already came to your site and they stayed for 3-4 minutes, they went to multiple pages, you don't need to give them the same pitch over and over again, right? So we've tried different pitches, shortening up the messaging, etc., and we've actually found that it helps boost conversion rates, not by a lot, but we've seen slight increases.
Okay. Well, and then also, Brooke is asking about whether A/B testing versus ABC. I think A/B really means, ABN. You can have as many versions as your data allows, and the more versions you can put in, given how much traffic you have, the more you're spreading your chances out of winning, right?
Exactly. My only recommendation is if you're trying to do multiple tests, like ABC testing, what we found out is you shouldn't try to change too many variables. What we see is people doing an A test with a headline, a B test with button colors, button text, different text copy, right? Like, you should try to figure out, like if I was doing a headline test, I would have an A, B, C, maybe even a D or E, but I would only be changing headlines within there, right? I wouldn't try to change headline in one variation, and the second variation change headline, call to action button, text on the page, and the third variation just changing the images and keeping the headlines the same. Like, I would just focus on specific test elements. If you're going to do headline, do headline.
Well, I'll beg to disagree with you on that one. It depends on your data rate. What we found is if you have a lot of data, you can actually have kind of a combination of tests. And in some versions, you do very mild variations, maybe a headline change like you're saying. Others could be complete reworks of the page and a completely different design or approach. So you kind of have tactical testing and big whole page redos in the same test. And you can answer a lot more questions. For example, how much does headline really matter, or how much does page structure or form length matter? You can kind of get at those things at the same time as you're testing a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good way to look at it. And the reason we only do specific tests at the same time is, like, just headlines by headlines, is we want to find out how sensitive our users are to headlines. And because we have a lot of traffic, what we'll do is we'll do the drastic changes. So we'll do drastic page variations versus other drastic variations. But we usually don't throw in like a headline test by itself when we're testing drastic changes, right? So one variation won't be slight.
Okay, well, fair enough. So you're basically saying just each test is more focused. I have to say that when you do design the kind of test that I'm describing, where you have radically different ones versus small incremental changes, it takes a lot more thought and experience to design tests like that, so I certainly don't recommend starting there. Okay, so let's talk about one of the things that's often overlooked if you have any kind of conversion page is the thank you page or the confirmation page. We found that it's a gold mine usually. Neil, have you ever tested the post confirmation page?
Yeah, I don't know what you've tested with, but we found that testing it with upsells works out quite well. So a lot of people on their thank you pages, they just put a page that says, hey, check out X, Y, and Z, and we found that that doesn't do as well at, or like, thanks for signing up, but we found that offering an upsell right there actually makes more money than most things.
Yeah, and meaning, in other words, the basic principle is if somebody is psychologically already moved to action and they've taken action, they've done whatever you've asked, asking them for an additional thing, either upping the ante or asking them for a smaller thing like a social media share at that point, they're already moving, so objects in motion tend to remain in motion, psychologically speaking.
Yep, you got it right.
So, folks, if you're not have some kind of ask on your post-conversion page, whether it's, again, social media or buy something 10 times more expensive than what you just bought, you should really consider playing with that. It's free money. Any other thoughts about, one of the questions that people have here is downloadable resources. Any ideas about what kind of content is the best bait, if you will, if you're not trying to get them to buy on the spot? What formats of downloadable resources come in handy or people respond well to?
I've seen ebooks and videos work the best.
Let's talk about each of those. Tell us some of your experiences.
Yeah, so we've seen downloadable resources like ebooks work extremely well when the ebook is related to the paid product, and the paid product provides more instant gratification of whatever the ebook is teaching you about, similar with videos. But if you give away too much for free, we found that it's really hard to get people to pay.
Makes sense. Well, I know we have a ton of questions, but we're running short on time. I just want to thank everyone again for listening in, and Neil, a huge thank you for joining us. We'll see you hopefully all in San Francisco in about 3 weeks or on our next webinar. This has been your host, Tim Ash from SiteTuners, and I want to thank our speaker, Neil Patel.